Okay, good morning. We are in Yoreh Basar B'chalav Siman Sadi Bet. We're at the end of the Ramah in Seif Zayin. The end of the Ramah, he writes, the last couple lines. Tipa hanofelet al gabe kisoy kedera, dina kenafla gabe kedera neged harotev. So the case, right, is you have, let's say, a big pot of stew cooking, a cholent pot, whatever it is, it's fleshik, and it's covered with the kisoy. It's covered, the lid is on. And so there's constant steam going up and down all around inside the pot. So if you have a drop of milk splatter and it lands on the top of the lid, on the kisoy, so it's considered as if it's opposite the rotev, the stew, the broth. Right? Before we had, let's say it was half full, we made a difference if it's keneged harekan or keneged harotev, the top half or the bottom half, airspace or the pot of food. So, right, those halachas we learned. So if it's on top of the kisui, it has the same halacha as it's keneged harotev. Okay, whatever those halachas were, that applies to the lid. Now that's assuming that the lid is on and it's already boiling or simmering, and all the vapors are going up to the lid. So then the steam goes up constantly. Umagia la kisui reaches the kisui, and then viyored and goes back down misham from there el harotev to the rotev. So it all becomes like one closed system, and it's as if the whole thing is full of rotev. Okay. Chet, new case. You have your. Okay, yeah, the zeya is like the mamish liquid. Chet, machavat shel chalav, shenatnu b'kira tachat kedera shel basar. So, and there are old standard kiras, they're ovens. Their ovens were their stoves. If you put it on the inside, there was the oven, and on top of the ovens, they were open, and that's where you put your pots. The pots were bigger than the opening, so they wouldn't fall through, or maybe they had a grate or something, whatever the case is. Grates. That's great.
Small little, like not grates that we have, but they were like, there was an opening there for the fire to come
so, machavat shel chalav, sorry. So now, inside the oven, you had a pan of milk that was cooking, or lasagna, cheese, whatever you're making, pizza, shenatnu. Well, let's assume it's something that's going to make steam and vapor. So let's assume, for simplicity, we're referring to something that's a liquid. Okay, whether cheese classifies or not, it's a question. We won't have an answer today. But let's say you have a liquid that's chalavi. Tachat hakadera shel basar. So this pot is open, and this pan, whatever, this pot, inside the oven, and so you're having vapor from the milchiks, rise above it, and it's heading the kadera right above it. On top of it is your pot of, you're making some lamb stew or whatever you're making. So therefore, the zeya is ole v'nivla b'kadera ve'osarta. So now, because you have the milchiks coming, the vapor of the milchiks coming up, and it's hot steam going straight to the pot, it's going to osir the entire kadera. Let's see, anything we need to point out? No, let's keep reading. Haga. So we're assuming the case over here that Ramah just points out is obviously we're talking about not just a milchik pot, but the food inside is milchik, because the steam of the pot's going to have a different din. It's much less. It's a notein tam. Okay, here we're talking about the chalavi itself is going up, and so therefore it's going to make it aser. And when it's chalavi itself, you have milk in there. Uba'inan shishim betavshil shebekadera neged achalav shebemachavat. So in order for it not to make the food in the pot aser, well, the pot's going to be a problem anyway at some level, but at least the food, you have to have at least shishim of in the pot keneged the milk or the milchik ingredient that is in the pot below, the pan below. So we're talking again, as we mentioned, the pan below the milchik it's open, so the steam goes. V'azeh ola min ha'machal atzmo. So you're having steam. It's actually the vapor of the milk, which has the same din of a milk, right? The zeya of the milk has the exact same din. It's not like where we had, let's say you're making cheese and you let it separate, the milk and the meat separates, and then it becomes, so then we have whey. So then the whey is a milchik, and then, but if you separate the whey again, that becomes parav. But the zeya, straight from the milk, always has the same din, lahalacha, the same din as the milk itself. Even though it's, obviously it's vapor, we consider it's like the milk itself is going up. Okay, so then, hazeya ola min ha'machal atzmo la she'aleh, so it hits the kedera above it. V'gam mairi, shehu bekarev kolkach. Karov kolkach. It has to be that it's close enough, shehayat, so let it bezeya b'makom shenogea b'kedera. This is all in the assumption that the zeya is close enough to the pot above it, that when steam hits it, it's the steam itself and everything is still yad, so let it bo. Okay? Aval, imena yad, so let it bezeya kol shari. If the zeya itself is cooling down and it's no longer yad, so let it bo, then everything is mutter. Ulachein, so it really depends on the specific case. Ulachein, tolin basar liyabish al kadera shel chalav, velo chayshinan lezeya she'ola. So therefore, let's say you have in your kitchen, you're cooking a milchik pot on top. On your stove top, you're cooking a milchik soup. There's milk in there. According to this, you're allowed to hang your salami above it, on top of your pot to dry out, even if the salami is uncovered. Okay? Now, the assumption is, I think let's keep reading. It's exactly the case. Al kedirot shel chalav, v'lo chayshinan lezeya she'ola. We're not choshesh for zeya. You only when you know that there's zeya going up and it's close enough in proximity and there's not so much airspace around, right? So that this case, our case of the salami would be okay. Unless it drips, correct. That's a separate issue. If you're afraid of the salami dripping, maybe the din would be different. And there'll probably be batal b'shishim. Okay, anyways. V'chein, im hamachavat mechuseh kol shari. And certainly, if you cover the pot, then for sure there's no issue whatsoever, because once you're having once it's covered, the zeya doesn't escape, unless of course it's wide open, but if it's covered, it's not escaping, so it's not an issue anymore. V'chein im hamachavat mechuseh kol shari, midi dihavaya shtei kederos nagazo bezo, de'ein osrin zed zeh benegia. So not exactly the same, but he brings a kol shekain raya. We know if you have two pots that are cooking at the same time, on the same stove top, on one burner you have a milchik pot cooking, on the other burner you have a fleshik pot cooking, and the two pots are touching each other while they're cooking, but all the liquid is on the inside. The outside is dry. So we say it's 100% fine. There's no problem. Everything's kosher. And we don't say nothing transfers from one to another. So he says, and in that case, right, there's no zeya in between. So he's saying the kol shekain over here, when it's covered, there's no zeya escaping. And so even if it'd be touching, it wouldn't be an issue.
What's the kol shekain?
The point is, there's no zeya. The kol shekain part is that there's no when there's no zeya, we're not worried about things transferring through lids or through pots.
So what we're saying is that even though there is zeya, but we have a lid on it, there's no
Correct.
zeya. That's the kol shekain.
Correct. That once you close it, it's because the lid, the pot itself is closed.
The zeya, so therefore you have now a issue.
Okay, good. There's ein osrin zeh benegia. Kol shekain bezeya, if it's covered. He means with the zeya when it's covered, because then the zeya stays inside. Mihu lechatchila yesh lizeher bekol zeh. Lechatchila, we don't hang salami over our stovetop if you might use it for milchiks. Okay, that's the Lachatchila.
So we don't
And-
rely on the Zeh being cold by the time it reaches.
Right, we never rely on the Zeh being called Lachatchila. Only, right.
You know, he used the Russian lachain, holy, which just sounds like very lachatchila.
Well, Mikar then. Well, okay. Lachatchila we
It's
don't.
really not an ideal scenario. Most places are advised not to cook a pot of meat and a pot of milk together next to each other for a variety of different reasons. But
Okay, before we get to Tzadi Tet and finish, this happens to be, believe it or not, I don't know, you weren't maybe thinking of ovens, but this is the Ikar Sugya, what comes out about using one oven for meat and milk. There's really two main issues. Our Seif just discussed, Seif really just discusses one. There's two main issues. There's Reicha, which is like aroma, which can even transfer from two dry foods. So we're going to save that for, I think it's Tzadi Hey or Tzadi Chet, around there. We'll save that for later. But when it comes to Zeya, the main issue, this is the main sugya that discusses Zeya, vapor, steam coming out of the food. So that's the main issue. So when you have our ovens, there are two issues. A regular, modern ovens, regular modern ovens that we have.
so our modern day ovens.
Right. I mean, it would include toaster ovens, which is worse. But let's just, for right now, let's just discuss our modern day ovens. So there could be an issue of Reicha. Zeya is a bigger issue. So let's just discuss it in terms of Zeya, and we'll save Reicha for later, which could make an issue for, the main issue of Reicha, I'll just say it out, is when you have, it could even, when you have basically it's aroma from one to another, that the main issue you're ever going to have is with certain foods, even if it's dry to dry, but the only issue of Reicha is if they're in the oven at the same time. That's the only issue you're going to have with Reicha. So we're never going to cook with meat and milk together in the same oven for obvious and unobvious reasons. So that's not even the question. The question is, can you be using the same oven for meat and milk when it's not the same time? At the same time, again, we'll discuss it, we'll probably get to it more. If everything is covered, then it might be okay. But we try not to use the same oven for meat and milk, for treif, for kosher at the same time. Again, it might be okay if it's, let's say, double wrapped for sure.
Wrap, microwave.
Right, so that's to avoid the issue. With double wrap, you avoid the issue. So let's just say you want to leave it open and not wrapped, and you want it, so it's going to be for sure a problem at the same time. Okay, so let's get to the main point. So we see from here, when it comes to Zeya, because of the concept of Zeya, if it's at the same time and they're open, for sure it's an issue. However, if everything is dry, it might not be a problem with Zeya. You still could have issues of Reicha, so we're not going to discuss to the nth degree is if you want to use them at the same time. It may or may not be okay. But just to point out, let's say you want to use them at separate times. So the main issue is only Zeya, because as we just saw over here, if it's open, anything that's moist gives off the steam and it penetrates into the walls, and now you made the walls fleshik or milchik. So that's the problem. So how is it okay to ever use the same oven without koshering? So obviously you could kosher your oven in between meat and milk. That's
Why is there Zeya?
what do you mean?
Where's the Zeya?
Let's say I cook in my pot.
The Blia of Zeya.
The Zeya is a blia, yeah. If you have mamashas between meat and milk, it's a problem. So you have to make sure it's dry and clean, and you can't just wipe off the grease with your finger. It has to be where it's clean. And then, okay. Now can you use the same oven? So as far as, we all know that you can kosher it in between. That's simple.
Generally, you're not supposed to kosher a pot from
Right, so when it comes to pots, we don't transfer daily from meat to milk and milk to meat by koshering. That's the minhag. So that's only by pots. Ovens are for sure not an issue. There's no minhag against this by ovens. The clear minhag of Klal Yisrael from time immemorial has always been to own only one oven and to only use one oven for meat and milk. And there was never these rules of you can't use it, you have to have a fleshik and a milchik oven, and there's no rules of waiting 24 hours. So it's clear one oven was always used. Now, some point out one thing better by the older ovens. Again, a lot of this is assumption, part of it's on some degree assumption, but the idea is the old ovens, you always had the fire revealed. Like you had the open coals or the open wood in the same oven together. Our ovens, you often have, again, the filament could be inside or outside a little bit, or it's a little bit covered. It could be our ovens are not as good from that perspective. Could be because their ovens may have been hotter or at least more direct with the fire, more direct heat. Okay. So I guess that's dropped. So anyways, let me just point out, fine, when it comes to koshering, just to get to the point, one way to kosher it, we all know, is to use a self-clean oven, but that's not healthy, and that's not what's needed. Okay? It's not healthy for the oven, sorry.
It's also not sitting around.
And right, and so that's not what's needed. So there, if you do want to kosher your oven, so what many say is just turn it on its highest temperature or the broil temperature. In Psakim Mechuvos, for example, he says you should put it on either with the broil setting, so the hottest filament is most exposed at its, that setting is fine at its normal hottest setting. He says do it just for half an hour. Some people say to do it for, he says like kechatzi shah. So many point out there's no exact minimum, there's no exact shear, and that as long as it reaches its highest temperature, so it takes time for it to reach that highest temperature, and then as long as it reaches its highest temperature, I don't know, maybe 30 minutes, maybe 15 minutes, maybe less. There's no exact, but that's the shear that's normally recommended by most, I believe. Some say you should put it on for at least an hour. I'm sure some say more. And he points out,
so that the forward should be till then.
in kuf, yeah, so it has to be at its fullest temperature.
There's no shear.
And every oven's a little different and depends, if you start it from zero or not. He also points out, it's on, just if you want to look it up in Daf Kuf Lametet, he quotes the Chuvas of Aruch Habosem, which is also quoted by Minchas Yitzchak, and seems fairly accepted, that when it comes to an oven, whenever we normally, something that's dry heat, we say you need libun chamur. But for a case of zeya is not the same as being roasting on the actual fire, the stick. So he points out that all you need for an oven at maximum, all you need is libun kal, and therefore if you're heating it up, I forget the exact temperature, 400, 500, around there, Fahrenheit, whatever it is, then, and the hottest temperature, then that's going to be fine. Even a ben yomo. So to kosher an oven over from one to another, you don't even have to wait 24 hours. Some do recommend waiting, some don't. The 24 hours. So I just wanted to, that's important.
Was a Deah mamashas that you cleaned
No,
off?
yeah, of course. You always have to clean off the mamashas. That's clear.
They are now the same thing.
Here, let's just, so let's discuss, I'm not sure, let's discuss that afterwards. I just want to point out, using the same oven, okay, this is important. Let's say you want to use the same oven and you don't want to kosher it. So there are two, first of all, I'm just going to quickly list about 9 things that make, I don't know if the number is accurate, but around 9 quick things why our ovens are much more makel, less of an issue than when we have an arseif of a pot on top of a pot. So number 1, the oven is okay. I mean, also in the times of Chazal, their ovens were open. Our ovens are vented usually. Now, it makes a difference if you have, a toaster oven, you have a regular oven. If it's vented, where the steam can escape or not escape. So like we had over here, everything, when the lid is closed, we say the steam goes up and it constantly moves around, And it's as if the top of the lid is even on, as if it's as if it's inside the pot. So obviously our ovens, if they're vented, is different. By the way, when you have these double ovens or an oven next to an oven, it's not really an issue also, because the walls, there's always like an airspace or insulation and whatever. So being an open oven and vented makes it much better. Okay, that's really one and two over here. You're using them at separate times. Our case, see if you're using it at the same time. In our oven, it gets burnt away. In our ovens, the steam can get burnt away in the walls when it's burnt, or as it's floating in the air. So, and we often don't see condensation in our ovens. If you were to open up an oven and check it on the top, again, it depends on the situation, but we often don't see Deah in our ovens. It depends. Okay. Now, with dry foods, we're going to see most poskim hold against machlokas. If you have any Deah from dry foods, like you have a dry roast, you're broiling something, it's a bread, whatever it is. So then it depends. All right, but we want to be yotzei al shitas. But okay, if your pot is covered, it won't be an issue, obviously. But anyways, we want to be able to use our oven when it's open, and our ovens are also larger. Our ovens are big, so that I don't know exactly how you define it. Different. We're not going to get into that, but some have the whole discussion. If your oven is a certain size, the Deah is not going to. I mean, we saw this sort of in a different way in the Ramah. If there's the distance from the top, the roof of the oven, and then it has to fill around the entire oven. Well, if it's big enough, then it's also not going to be an issue. Basically, okay. It's only about a few differences. So that's that. So yeah, it's about 6. Anyways, they're
6, 9, it's Jewish.
so it's a little bit different. And okay, so let's say you want to use the same oven. I'll just point out there are 2 main opinions out there. One says you can use the same. One makes a distinction if it's covered or not covered. That's huge. If you're using it for covered liquids or not covered liquids. In other words, you have. I will start off with the more machmer opinion. The more machmer opinion is if you want to use the same oven for meat and milk, you just have to make sure, without koshering we're talking about, the same day without koshering. You want to use the same oven for meat and milk. All you have to do is make sure you designate it, your oven, as or fleshik or milchik. And always use it for, it's always considered one, unless you're going to kosher it over. The one that it is, you can use it however you want, even with an open liquids, right? This is the main difference. If you want to use it for the other one, let's say you make it a fleshik oven, you want to use it for milchiks, never use it with, you can use it for dry milchiks. Don't ever use it for liquid milchiks unless it's covered with the lid. That's one popular approach. The other approach is because like we said, the Deah gets burnt as it goes up, or it cleans itself as when you turn it on, or because it's very large. It's very common to give the psak. There's 2 main psakim. The other one is you could even use it for meat and milk, just not at the same time. Make sure it's completely clean, and both of them can be liquid, and both of them can have no lid or covering. So that's basically the full. Let's.
You have to let it cool down in
Okay.
between.
You should need to let it cool down in between to be. Yeah, let's just say it needs to be cooled down. Maybe not b'diavad, but certainly, maybe we'll just stop here.
Right.